Have you ever asked the question, why do bad things happen to good people? Or ever wondered, why is God doing this to me? It's extremely common to feel anxious and frustrated during what we consider hard times. But there's a more productive and spiritually enriching way to approach these challenges. One that aligns with the teachings of the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Instead of asking why, let's ask what. What should I be doing in this situation? What does God want from me? In this story, we'll explore this powerful shift in perspective by looking into the life of Prophet Ayyub. Although his story is not extensively detailed in the Quran, the verses we do have are enough to guide anyone through a crisis of faith. By the end of the story, you'll have a deeper understanding of what true tawakkul or trust in Allah looks like. Prophet Ayyub was a descendant of Ishaq and came from a strong prophetic lineage. Ayyub was favored by Allah and blessed abundantly in many aspects of his life. He was a handsome man with robust health and immense wealth. His lands flourished with livestock, and his properties were vast and prosperous. Moreover, he was surrounded by a strong and loving family, blessed with a beautiful wife and many children. Despite these worldly blessings, what truly set Ayyub apart was his gratitude and devotion to Allah. He was known far and wide as a thankful servant of God, constantly uttering praises to the Most High for all the favors he had received. Ayyub's faith was steadfast, and his heart was always filled with gratefulness, irrespective of his material success. This devotion laid the foundation for the profound lessons his life would soon impart. Allah, in his infinite wisdom, decided to test Ayyub to see if his slave and devout worshipper would remain steadfast if his condition changed. The heavens watched with bated breath as the trials began, each one more severe than the last. Ayyub's trials began with the loss of his immense wealth. A firestorm ravaged his lands, destroying his crops and killing his livestock. The once fertile fields that were the source of his prosperity now lay barren and desolate. People whispered and speculated about Ayyub's misfortune, but Ayyub himself did not falter. With his heart steadfast, he bowed in prayer and said, "From Allah we came, and to Him we shall return. He gives and He takes as He wills." Allah then decided to test Ayyub further by the demise of his offspring. Scholars have narrated that his children were enjoying their meal when suddenly the roof of their home collapsed on them, sparing no one. In one swoop, all his children perished under the rubble. The joy and laughter that once filled Ayyub's home were replaced by silence and sorrow. The grief was overwhelming. His wife, too, was struck by profound sorrow, having lost all her children in a single devastating moment. Despite this unimaginable loss, Ayyub's response was extraordinary. In his suffering, Ayyub remained faithful in his worship and gratitude. His patience and unshakable faith transformed his trials into profound acts of devotion. Allah then decided to test Ayyub once more. A painful affliction was sent upon him, an affliction never seen by the people and Ayyub before. He was plagued by a disease that seemed to eat away at his flesh, his skin blistering and becoming painful to the touch. Simultaneously, his internal organs began to fail and rot. The suffering was beyond comprehension. Ayyub faced agony as his body wasted away, the pain constant and excruciating. His once strong and handsome form was reduced to a shadow of its former self. The sores covering his body emitted a foul odor, causing people to shun him completely. Even those who once admired and respected him now distanced themselves, afraid of the disease and repulsed by his appearance. The people were convinced that Ayyub was being punished by Allah. No man could go through so much suffering and still claim to be a chosen servant. To them, it seemed the curse of Allah had befallen him. This belief grew stronger amongst the people, and a few influential men from the city met in secret, outlining what they would do with Ayyub. These men, who were leaders and elders of the community, gathered in a dimly lit room. Their faces were etched with concern and determination. We must do something. Ayyub's presence is a reminder of calamity. We cannot have him amongst us any longer. Another man added, if Ayyub is truly cursed, then his presence might bring misfortune upon us all. We must send him away from the city. The men nodded in agreement, convinced that they were protecting their communities from further harm. They decided to confront Ayyub and demand that he leaves the city. The next morning, the men approached Ayyub's home. Despite their fear and disdain, they found Ayyub in prayer, his frail body bowed in supplication. His wife, standing nearby, looked at the men with weary eyes. One of the elders stepped forward, clearing his throat. Ayyub, we have come to speak with you about your condition. The people believe that you are cursed by Allah. Your suffering is seen as a sign of divine displeasure. Ayyub looked up, his eyes calm. He listened quietly as the elder continued. We believe it is best for all of us if you leave the city. This way you can seek solace and healing elsewhere, and the people can be at peace. Ayyub's wife, hearing these words, felt her heart break a little more. She looked at her husband, waiting for his response. Ayyub, despite the pain and sorrow etched into his being, spoke with a voice steady and filled with faith. I understand your concerns, he said, but know this, my suffering is not a curse, but a test from Allah. I remain his servant, grateful for his mercy and wisdom. If it is your wish for me to leave, I will do so, and I will bear no ill will towards any of you. With heavy hearts, Ayyub and his wife prepared to leave their home. They packed what little they had left and began their journey to the outskirts of the city. As they walked, Ayyub continued to pray, his faith unbroken, his heart firm. The couple found shelter in a humble dwelling on the edge of the wilderness. Despite their isolation, Ayyub's wife remained devoted, tending to her husband with love and care. Their new home, though modest, became a place of deep spiritual reflection and faith. Over time, Ayyub's health continued to deteriorate until the only two organs that were not affected by disease were his tongue and his heart. It is narrated that Ayyub remained in this state for 18 long years. He was now old, frail, and completely bedridden, unable to move without assistance. Ayyub's wife had no choice but to seek work within the city, to find sustenance to be able to feed her husband and herself. Each day she would rise before dawn and walk to the city to toil in whatever work she could find. Ayyub's wife was met by scorn and ill talk as she ventured into the city seeking work. A woman who had once overseen slaves and maids was now humbling herself to clean the houses of others. Despite never having worked in such circumstances before, she persisted, driven by her love for her husband and her commitment to care for him. Day after day, she endured the judgmental stares and whispered gossip of those around her. With each passing day, the number of households willing to hire her dwindled as the story of her and Ayyub being punished by God gained traction amongst the people. Finally, the work dried up completely, her only focus now being the care of her ailing husband. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, her strength began to wane under the weight of their struggles. At the crucial time when she found herself desperate to find food for her husband, she made a difficult decision. She decided to cut her hair and sell it to gain some sustenance. It was a sacrifice she was willing to make, despite the cultural significance and personal attachment she had to her hair. With a heavy heart, she went to the market and sold her hair, earning enough to buy food for Ayyub. As she returned home with bags filled with provisions, her heart weighed down by the burden of her sacrifice. When she arrived home, Ayyub noticed the abundance of food and questioned her. "How did you manage to acquire so much food?" Ayyub asked. His wife hesitated, trying to dismiss his inquiries with a smile. But Ayyub, sensing something wrong, persisted. "Tell me the truth. I can see that something is troubling you." Unable to hide the truth any longer, she sighed and lowered her gaze. With trembling hands, she removed her hijab, revealing her cropped hair to Ayyub's astonished eyes. She explained to Ayyub that she had cut her hair so they could eat. Ayyub's initial reaction was one of shock and dismay. The thought of his beloved wife sacrificing her own dignity for his sake filled him with sorrow. In his distress, Ayyub uttered words that he would come to regret deeply. "By Allah, I will lash you 100 times when I am better," Ayyub exclaimed, his voice laced with anguish and frustration. Ayyub's wife, hurt by his words, felt a wave of sadness wash over her. With tears in her eyes, she quietly left the room, her heart aching with sorrow. As she composed herself, she addressed Ayyub, her voice trembling with emotion. "How long is this going to last, my dear husband?" she asked, her voice choked with tears. "You are a prophet of Allah. Why don't you ask him to heal you?" Ayyub listened to her words, his heart heavy with guilt and remorse. Slowly he reached out to her. "My dear wife," he said softly, "Allah has blessed us for 80 years with abundance in everything. Now, in my old age, if I am suffering, should I not be grateful for what he had given me?" After years of tireless devotion to her husband, Ayyub's wife found herself exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The weight of their struggles had taken its toll on her, and for the first time she felt herself on the brink of collapse. Despite her love for Ayyub, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the enormity of their situation. With a heavy heart, she made the difficult decision to retreat herself for a few days, leaving Ayyub with sustenance. As Ayyub lay there, his body weakened by years of illness, he felt a wave of despair wash over him. Unable to move, he cried out to his Lord, his voice trembling with emotion. "O my Lord, verily distress has seized me, and you are the most merciful of all those who show mercy." With those words, Ayyub poured out his soul to Allah, seeking help from the burden of his suffering. He knew that Allah, in His infinite mercy, was the only one who could ease his pain and grant him peace. As his prayer echoed through the stillness of the room, Ayyub felt a sense of calm wash over him. At that very moment, Allah the most merciful, the most wise, responded. He sent an angel to Ayyub's bedside, a celestial messenger bathed in light and radiating with compassion. The angel approached Ayyub, his presence filling the room with a sense of awe and reverence. "Ayyub," the angel said, his voice resonating with divine power, Your Lord has heard your prayer. He has seen your suffering and unwavering faith. Now, strike the ground with your foot." With a surge of determination coursing through his veins, Ayyub summoned all the strength he had left. Without any assistance, he lifted his foot off his bed and struck the ground with all his might. As Ayyub's foot made contact with the earth below, a miraculous transformation occurred. Suddenly, a spring of water gushed forth from the ground, its cool, clear waters shimmering in the light. It was a spring of healing, a gift from Allah to his devoted servant. Ayyub arose from his bed with a strength he hadn't felt in years. With trembling hands, he reached up and began to clean his head, his movements slow and deliberate. As he washed, he felt the weight of his suffering begin to lift, replaced by a sense of renewal and hope. Slowly, Ayyub worked his way down his arms, his skin tingling with the touch of the miraculous water. With each passing moment, he felt his blisters disappear, his skin healing before his very eyes. It was a sight beyond comprehension, a testament to the power of Allah's mercy. As he continued to wash, Ayyub felt the water penetrate deep in his body, replenishing his organs with newfound strength and vitality. It was as if a dormant energy had been awakened within him, sparking life into every fiber of his being. By the time he was done washing and drinking from the healing spring, Ayyub felt as though he had been reborn. His body, once ravaged by disease and suffering, was now restored to perfect health. His organs rejuvenated, and his skin glowed with a newfound radiance. As Ayyub stood there, his wife returned to their house, standing at the entrance of their home. Her eyes widened in astonishment as she beheld the sight before her, but she did not recognize the man standing there. "There was an old man here," she exclaimed, her voice filled with confusion. "Where has he gone?" Ayyub turned round and smiled gently, his heart overflowing with gratitude and joy. "It is me," he replied, his voice filled with wonder. "Allah has cured my sickness and given me back my health." Her eyes filled with tears of disbelief as she realized the truth of Ayyub's words. Overwhelmed with emotion, she rushed forward and embraced her husband tightly, unable to contain her joy. "O Ayyub," she exclaimed, "praise be to Allah for his boundless mercy and compassion," her voice trembling with emotion. In that moment of divine grace, Allah blessed his wife as well. As she held on to Ayyub, she felt a surge of energy course through her body, her youth restored and her beauty radiant once more. As Ayyub stood there with his wife, another miraculous event unfolded before his eyes. A swarm of locusts suddenly descended upon his home, their buzzing wings filling the air with a deafening hum. But as they came near Ayyub, something extraordinary happened. The locusts, instead of causing destruction, transformed into solid gold as they approached Ayyub. They fell to the floor around him, shimmering in the light of the room. Ayyub watched in amazement as the insects turned into precious metals before his eyes. Filled with awe and gratitude, Ayyub knelt down beside the golden locusts, his hands trembling with excitement. He gathered them up with his cloth, marveling at the mercy that Allah had bestowed upon him. With a heart full of gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose, Ayyub rose to his feet. The weight of his past afflictions lifted from his shoulders. He knew that he had been given a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. As Ayyub continued to bask in the glow of Allah's mercy, over time he received another miraculous gift in the form of more children. These new additions to his family brought immeasurable joy and happiness. filling his home with laughter and love once more. What had been taken away from him as a test was now given back to him many times over as a reward for his patience and unwavering faith. Ayyub and his wife rejoiced in the blessings bestowed upon them, their hearts overflowing with gratitude for the boundless mercy of Allah. One day, as Ayyub was deep in prayer, Allah the Most High, the Most Wise, in a manner that befits His Majesty, reminded Ayyub of the oath he had made to strike his wife when he had become better. With a heavy heart, Ayyub acknowledged his promise, but he also sought guidance on how to fulfill it without causing harm to his beloved wife. In His infinite wisdom and mercy, Allah provided Ayyub with a solution. He instructed him to gather 100 grass-like stalks and bundle them together. With this simple yet profound act, Ayyub could fulfill his oath with one full sweep without causing any harm to his wife. Filled with love, Ayyub set out to gather the stalks, each one a symbol of his commitment to Allah. With each blade of dried stalk he collected, Ayyub felt the weight of his oath lifting from his heart, replaced by a sense of peace and forgiveness. And so, in a romanticized gesture of love and devotion, Ayyub gently brushed the bundle against his wife's skin, fulfilling his oath to Allah. As he did so, he looked into her eyes with love and reverence, grateful for her unwavering support and understanding. Remember, in the face of adversity, do not succumb to complaints or despair. Instead, seek the beauty of patience, just as Ayyub did. Have faith that Allah will reward your patience and perseverance, whether in this life or the next. Always remember that Allah holds everything in His hands and He can change your situation in an instant. For just as He transformed Ayyub's suffering into abundance, so too can He guide you through your trials and lead you to a place of peace and fulfillment.